Hi everyone. My name is Kristen Quattlebaum and I am the owner and founder of KQ Coaching. As an intuitive life coach, I really specialize in helping others who feel stuck in their path. They're just not sure of where they want to go in life and they feel like they've continued to execute the same patterns in their life. So they're really looking to discover, what is my path? Where do I belong? And how do I find that? So what I do is help them to unravel all of those layers of conditioning and really get to the core of their true essence. Who are they at their core? What are their true beliefs? And what do they stand for? And how can they stand in that confidently? And the intuitive piece is really about, I've done a lot of healing work on myself, and so I've been able to become a clear channel of my intuition, and now I can be a conduit for others and theirs. So I am really able to tune into my client and help them see and clear subconscious blocks that are holding them away from propelling forward on their path. Okay. So I want to start with just a little bit about my story and just some parts of where fear has come into my life. Right now, I know that fear is pretty heavy, and that feels like an understatement in society. And prior to this pandemic, we were already in a fear-based society. So this has just magnified things to a whole nother level. And so I want to spend some time talking today about navigating fear. But first, let me share you a couple pieces of my story without getting into the whole thing to help you understand how I have navigated through fear and throughout my path. So I spent about 15 years in corporate searching for myself. I really spent a lot of time just looking for what position, more money, more opportunities. Like I was just so set on finding my path in corporate, and I struggled to find where I belonged. So what happened for me is that I started getting little nudges for the universe. And the first was, I would say, a big break of anxiety. And I wasn't used to dealing with anxiety, and so I really felt incapacitated. I really felt like I didn't know how to deal with it. It was too much. It was overbearing. It was overwhelming. How do I deal with this? And so I went to the doctor, and she ended up sending me to a therapist. And so this moment was a crossroads for me. I could have chosen to wallow in my anxiety and feel that I was powerless in the moment, but instead I chose a path of, I'm going to seek help and I am going to face this and figure out how I can shift this in my life, because I know for certain that I do not want to live an anxiety-filled life. So that was one instance. And then throughout my career, I had multiple other instances come up where in the last few years of my career, I actually had 2 positions eliminated. And it was actually like the original position, it was the last 3 years of my career, but within a year of each other, I had 2 positions eliminated. And so in the first position, I was already that's when I started seeking a coach, and I was in my first group coaching program. And I remember when I was laid off from that position, I felt really lost. I felt like I'm not ready to start this coaching career. I'm not ready to go down this path, but I also know that this is happening to me for a reason. It's happening for me. And so I decided to spend a lot of time just internally reflecting, and I spent a lot of time in nature. I did a lot of root chakra meditations. If you're familiar with the chakra system, the root chakra is our foundation. It's where our stability is. If you think of a tree and roots into a ground, it's how we feel grounded and safe. And so I spent a lot of time just reflecting on how I was feeling and what I wanted in my life. And that was a big period of uncertainty for me. And I could have chosen to just find another position where I didn't really feel fulfilled, or I could choose to seek within and figure out, what do I really want? What feels good for my next step? And so I ended up spending about 6 months in that internal reflection. I got another position, which was again eliminated. And after about 6 months of being there, and here I am at this point. I was just about to graduate from my first coaching certification. So at this point, I was ready to start my business, but I didn't know how it all was gonna look. I just knew I was ready to start my business and get into the coaching world. Also, I felt that having 2 positions eliminated after a very successful corporate career meant that the universe was giving me a sign. It's time to leave corporate and get into coaching. And so I took the leap without having any sort of safety net. At the time was soul supporting myself, and I still am. And I had to lean into what this uncertainty looked and felt like, and just trust in myself and trust that I was being guided in a direction that was right for me. And so this past year, I've had my business now for about a year. Anybody who is an entrepreneur knows that there's a lot of ups and downs in that journey. And, there's a lot of uncertainty there. So I am sharing with you today about navigating fear, coming from a space of having done it myself. And I can tell you that you always have a choice. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So currently, as we know, there's a lot of fear in society right now, and the mind is fear-based. It's based in survival and wants to keep us safe. And it also likes to be busy. So when you have an anxious mind, you have something to think about, right? That loop, that spiral that you can get really sucked into. And the mind likes that. It thrives in that. So sometimes if you're not aware of that, it can be very difficult to step outside of that and feel like you have a choice. So Esther Hicks and Abraham Hicks has an emotional scale. And there are 22 emotions on this scale, and fear is at the very bottom. Fear, grief, and powerlessness sit at the bottom, where joy and love sit at the top, number 1. And I'm reading the book called Super Attractor right now, and I love the way Gabby Bernstein talks about this scale, because she talks about how, instead of, your choice is not moving from fear to love necessarily. But you can choose to move gradually up that scale. And further up the scale are emotions like anger. And so if you are in a space of feeling a lot of anxiety and fear, if you can seek for the next best emotion that you can reach, trying to reach your way up that scale, and I can share that scale as well, you will end up finding yourself at a higher frequency. Everything is energy. And when we're vibrating at a very low energy like fear, it can spiral and manifest in our lives in ways that we don't want. It just creates more and more fear. What you focus on expands. So I love this scale, and I'm happy to share it with anyone who's interested. So the other thing is about emotion is that oftentimes as humans, we don't know how to cope with our emotions. So we either suppress them, and we can get really good at that to the point where we don't even know that they're there, or we can wallow in them. right? That's spiral. And whichever one of those you would choose, which tends to be the natural tendency, you're stuck. You're stuck in that emotion, right? It doesn't feel like there's a way out. But there's always a choice. And when you believe that you don't have a choice, your thoughts are your reality. So if you believe I don't have a choice but to be in this fear, then that's exactly what will happen. You're giving your power away to that emotion. So one of the things that you can do there is look at what are the facts? What are the facts in this situation? What is known and what is unknown to me? And there's a great quote that says, "We do not fear the unknown, we fear what we think about the unknown." Or what we believe to be true about the unknown, if you want to say it a different way. It is not, when we are afraid of the unknown, we're borrowing fear. We're borrowing from things that haven't manifested into reality. So when you can step back and say, okay, what do I know to be true here? And what is not? Like, what is a story that I'm making up about this situation? What is not true? When you can look at that from like an observer perspective, it can be really helpful in helping you move on. So I'm also doing, Rachel Hollis has a challenge right now called the Next 90 Days. And she says something in the challenge that I really love. She says, your fear is a privilege. And it really struck me and what she meant by that was that so many of us are stuck fearing the unknown when there are people out there that have true fears, that cannot feed their kids, that cannot make their next mortgage payment, and that's known. So I love that she says that because I feel like it gives it a lot of perspective in what you are choosing to believe and make a reality in your life. Okay, so I want to move on and talk about some ways to kind of break down the fear. Firstly, though, I want to say, in terms of being fearless, I don't believe that it's not actually possible to be fearless. But what you can do is change your relationship to how you deal with fear. That's where you have your power. So I really want to challenge us to shift from feeling like we're powerless in this uncertainty and unattach from all of the things that we felt gave us certainty, because that's where our fears are. What we thought was certain and what we thought was security, when those things are stripped away from us, that's what makes us scared. That uncertainty. Okay, so navigating the fear. The first thing when you're looking and observing, so talking a little bit about observation versus identification. When you can become an observer of what's going on in your life, that's where you have your power. When you identify it, so for example, with anxiety, saying something like, I am an anxious person versus I am sensing anxiety in my body right now. Can you tell the difference between the two? One of them is from, I still have my power and I'm observing. And the other one is I've identified with this emotion and I feel like I don't have control. I don't have power. I don't have a choice. And again, your thoughts become your reality. Okay, so what is the first thing that you can do? The first thing always with any of this work is awareness. So seeing the fear, seeing that it's there. That's always the first step. The next step is understanding it. What is this fear? Why is it here? So calling it out. The next piece is beliefs, stripping down your beliefs about it. So what does this fear mean to you? Like, where is this coming from? And whose belief is it? So for example, when I had my first position eliminated, I felt that my security was stripped out from under me, right? I looked at having a job as security, and more in depth there, money. I had a steady flow of income coming in. So I've attached my safety to money. And this is very common. So many of us do this because it's what we've learned. It's what we've been conditioned to believe. And what those 6 months after me losing that job taught me was how to find safety within me without having money coming in. How can I find that safety within me and not rely on something external to provide that to me? So they're breaking down the beliefs, like, who taught me that money means safety? Where did I get that from? And is it my belief? Is it society's belief? Is it my parents' belief? Whose is it? Is it even mine to have? And then, is it true? You know, do I really believe this? When you strip back all the fear and you're in a really objective space, do I believe this? And then also, like, getting into, when you're examining your fears, getting into worst case. What is the worst case scenario here? You know, and with money, so let's say I've drained all of my accounts and I can no longer pay for my house. What happens? So I have to get rid of my house. I have to get rid of all of these things that I've purchased in my house, that I've earned, that I've worked so hard for. The reality is, for me, to be really truthful with you right now, I look around me and I feel like these things that I have in my house, they don't mean anything to me. They're just things. You know, and me having my own house, like, what does that mean? What does that stand for me? Well, it means that I've been able to take care of myself. I'm independent. I can support myself. And sure, that means something to me. But if it came to a point where I couldn't afford my house anymore, does that mean that I can no longer support myself? So you see, it's really like unraveling. That's what it's like to question everything you thought you believed, you thought you knew about yourself, your life, the world, what safety means to you, and just really getting to the bottom of, like, who am I without all of these things outside of me? And that honestly is what's made people so uncomfortable right now, because we're in the middle of a pandemic and people have been forced to spend time with themselves. They've been forced to change. They've been forced out of their box, forced out of their daily routine. And the fact that like is untethering to people, it's just an indication, it's an invitation to you to say, like, wow, like, what is it in me that's responding in this way? What makes me so comfortable with spending all this time at home alone or with just my family? Why is that so uncomfortable for me? And oftentimes the reason is because we've spent our whole lives numbing our emotions, numbing our pain through keeping ourselves busy, working, doing all the things. We're afraid to see ourselves. And yet that's the very thing we want the most. So this is really about unraveling you. The next piece is shifting. So now it's acknowledging the emotion, thanking that it's there. Thank you, anxiety, for showing me that I have a fear here. And now, like, what do I choose to believe about it? You know, there's no judgment here. This is a gratitude. This is I am happy that it's here. I'm happy that I am triggered because I want to know what's underneath it. How can I heal? What part of me is left unhealed that's feeling this trigger right now? And then that's where you get to your truth. What do I choose to believe right now? Like in my example about losing the house, I can still support myself. I believe in me. I choose to believe in me. I choose to believe that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to support myself, whether I have a house or not. So it's about shifting next. And then taking action. So as you start to shift these pathways in your brain, I like to describe it as, coming to a fork in a road, and your whole life you've been going left. You've been numbing, you've been going with the flow, you've just been doing your everyday life in the same way. So how can I choose to go right now? And what will happen as you're building these new pathways in your brain is that you're going to want to go left because that's the more ingrained path. That's the way you know, that's comfortable, that's certain for you, it's safe. You know that path. But now that you've learned that there's another way, now it's about choosing to go that way when you come to those crossroads, because you will. And you get to decide to go right. And it's never, another thing to say here is that, you get to create your reality. You get to choose this path. You get to choose which direction you take. Going back to your thoughts become your reality. Same thing here. Choosing right, that becomes your reality now. Now you're standing up to the fear. Now you're taking your power back. And it takes courage to go in a new direction. So you really have to be committed to who you are, to the path that you want to be on, in order to stay true to that path. And the last piece is just about energy. So as I mentioned, everything is energy. Your words, your actions, everything that you do is so important because you're creating your reality with everything. So if you're talking a lot about fear, guess what's going to be in your life? And on the flip side, if you're talking a lot about choosing a new direction, choosing differently, taking my power back, I choose to expand in a time of contraction, that becomes your reality. Your words are so important. So I always tell my clients, be hyper aware of your words. Even any time you're saying, I need to, I should be, I have to, there's judgment behind those words. It's an invitation to question. There's a belief here, what's underneath this? Why is this judgment here? And I did an exercise. That's the end of my navigating fear piece. But lastly, I wanted to share with you, I have another video where I shared a process that I walked through in just facing my fears. And what I did there was, I just wanted to share briefly here, that process, what that looked like for me was getting really present and grounded in recognizing that I had some fears coming up. And instead of me just letting them sit, letting them suppress, letting them wallow, I chose to face them. And I sat down and I said, okay, fear, let's do this. What do you got? What's here for me? What are my fears right now? And I just got really grounded and truthful with myself, and I wrote down every single fear I was feeling. And then what I did was I connected to my truth, my intuition, my true self. And I asked, what is the truth here? So it's very similar to the process I just walk you through. It's just I've done so much work that I'm able to, that's the process I walk through now. I'm clearing the limiting beliefs there, the fears. And I ask myself, what is the truth about this fear? And what I wanted to share with you about this exercise is the evidence. So I had a notebook, and I think I had about 10 lines of fear written out, of fears. And when I finished asking for truth, I had about 2 pages of truth. So what I want you to see about that is how much love and truth is greater than fear. Fear spreads fast, like rapid fire, but love spreads faster. So what do you choose?